we have our ongoing sponsors here. So as I mentioned, Spacecubed is the company that runs this space. And then we also have WP Engine. So for those of you who aren't familiar with WP Engine, they are a hosting company that provide managed WordPress hosting. This is a little bit of information about two of the spaces. Since I put this slide together, they've actually opened a bunch more. So there's also one down at number 32, St George's Terrace, and there's a handful of others around WA and Perth as well. WP Engine provide really great digital hosting. So if you're looking for a managed WordPress hosting company, I encourage you to look them up. They're the premium hosting service out there. This is my business, actually, House Digital. So drinks are on us tonight. You're welcome. And we build websites for organisations, tourism, and large sort of commercial clients. So I am also an advisor with the Australian Small Business Advisory Service, and Gaye Nilson, who's one of our speakers today, is also an advisor, and so is my husband Ross, who's floating around somewhere. So if you're looking for low cost or free, if it's your first session help and you have a small business and an ABN, you can check us out. Silver Key Films is Olivia and Dee. So Olivia's over here setting up one of the cameras right now, and Dee's up the back, and they make amazing videos. So if you'd like to see them, I do encourage you to go and check out their YouTube channel. They're fantastic. They do a lot of commercial work. If you have clients who are looking for video, I really cannot tell you how great the quality of the film that they make is. I've used them myself personally, and I really just wouldn't hesitate to recommend them. And they're donating their time today to make sure that we can bring this meetup to the entire world. So thank you very much, Olivia and Dee, we're really excited to have you here today. If you would like to connect with them, Olivia at silverkeyfilms.com, or you can scan the QR code or just, chat to them later. And lastly, if you would like to join the community outside of this space and other than on the days that we host meetups, I encourage you to jump onto Facebook. We have groups/Perth WordPress. So if you search for Perth WordPress community, you will find the group that we have on there. So that's a great place to ask your burning questions about, what hosting company should I switch to? Or, does anyone know a plugin that does such and such? And then the other place that we hang out is on Slack. So for those of you that are a little bit more techie and like me, don't like being on Facebook, Slack is the other place that we hang out, and that's actually an Australia-wide Slack workspace. So if you are on Slack and that is your workspace of choice, then you can hang out with not just us, but also the meetups from Brisbane and Sydney and Melbourne and all of the other places. So it's a great place to connect with other WordPress professionals and users. So I think that is pretty much it so far in terms of the sponsors, and we're really grateful for them because without them it wouldn't be possible to host our WordPress meetups. And today we're doing things a little bit differently from how some of our older meetups ran, and we've actually got 4 speakers, and we're going to invite each of them up just to give us a short sort of introduction to the topic that they'll be representing. And at the end, the bit that everyone's really here for is where we start pulling out the shotguns and dueling. No, not really. We're going to invite all 4 of the speakers up the front, and we're going to be doing a bit of a facilitated panel discussion. So to kick things off, we're going to introduce Daniel from Automattic. So if you aren't aware, Automattic is the company that runs WordPress.com and WooCommerce. So he's kind of in the know when it comes to things WordPress related. And he actually works on the Gutenberg project, on the block editor. So that's actually the builder that we're going to be starting with today, and that's what he's going to be talking about. And because we kind of threw him under the bus, he hasn't prepared any slides, but we are actually going to bring up the block editor so that he can sort of talk through it if need be. So Dan, do you want to join us up the front and maybe introduce yourself a little bit better than what I could, and I'll bring up the stuff on the screen for you.
Yes, I'm Dan. So I've been working with Automattic for a couple of years now, and during that time, luckily enough to be sponsored as an open source contributor on WordPress. And I work primarily on Gutenberg. Which is really exciting to be a part of WordPress's future. So as Jo mentioned, I didn't realize we could prepare slides for this. So I just have my little bit of paper here with some notes on it. But yeah, I'll try and talk you through why I think Gutenberg is a really compelling option. So one really interesting thing that just happened last week is Gutenberg had its 100th release, which I think shows the amount of development that's going into it. We released version 10 of the plugin. And yeah, so we continue to release every couple of weeks new features. So I think that's really compelling. And another thing, compared to the other page builders, it's open source. It'll always be free, so you don't have to look at any complicated pricing tables to figure out what features you're going to get. You'll always get all the features. I think a really good option about Gutenberg, a really good bonus, is that you kind of avoid the lock-in. I don't know if anyone's built a website with Elementor or another page builder, and you go beyond a certain point and it's kind of difficult. That if you decide it's not for you, it's difficult to change option. It's difficult to go with another page builder. But Gutenberg being a part of WordPress, it will kind of always be there, and blocks are something that will always be supported. So that's why I think it's a really good option. But I don't think it's necessarily has to be viewed as an alternative to page builders either. I think it's something that can work with page builders as well. So all of the APIs that we develop for Gutenberg are completely open to be used by page builders. So another page builder could implement features that use blocks from the block editor as well. So yeah, I think this is something that we'll start to see a lot more of in the future, is other page builders starting to kind of have tighter integrations with the block editor in WordPress, which I think will be really exciting. So an example of that might be a fairly recently released feature in Gutenberg is patterns. So you can insert, say, like a hero on your web page just using one of the patterns that's offered, and plugins and themes are offering these patterns as part of Gutenberg. And you might see the ability to build these with page builders potentially, and then insert them straight into your site, or on the flip side, build them with WordPress, and maybe the page builder will support the same patterns as well. Another thing recently is WP Tavern did an article about performance with page builders, and they measured the performance of the block editor, and they went through the process of building a single page site, and then ran it through the page speed, and it turned out that the page built with the block editor was significantly faster, loaded significantly quicker than that was built with Elementor. So I think that's another great reason. I've mentioned as well future support. Like WordPress always aims to support all of its past features going forwards. So I think that's a really good reason. The block editor also, another criticism of other page builders is quite often that they don't produce very clean HTML. So when you put together a site, you might get very complicated markup that's difficult to apply custom styling to. One of the focuses with the block editor is you get very clean HTML. For example, a paragraph block is just a single paragraph tag. And I think the future for the block editor is going to be really exciting. So you're going to see the current phase that is being worked on is the full site editing phase. So this is not quite finished yet, but in the future you'll see the ability to build an entire website. So you might be able to work on the header part of your website using the block editor, the footer, sidebars, that kind of thing. You'll be able to build the whole website using one tool, all tightly integrated with how WordPress works. After that, there's phase 3, which focuses on collaborative editing. So you might have potentially multiple users editing a post or a site, and similar to how, say, Google Docs works, you'll be able to kind of work together collaboratively on the same document, and you'll get kind of things like history tracking potentially as well. And then the final phase is bringing internationalization and localization of content directly into WordPress, where in the past you've always had to use plugins to internationalize your site, to translate them into different languages. And this is something that will become a core feature of WordPress in the future. So it's only fair to look at some of the downsides as well. So as I mentioned, like full site editing is not quite finished. So, I mean, when you compare to other page builders where today you can go and build an entire website, it's a little bit more tricky in the block editor. You have to kind of maybe bring in a few plugins or use a specific theme to allow you to do that. So that is something that, might be a bit more challenging today, but probably later this year, you'll be able to do a lot more, hopefully. Another thing that's worth mentioning is kind of part of the WordPress ethos is not to add every feature to the editor. It's like it will never become like the kitchen sink where you can do absolutely everything. There's always some space left open for plugins to kind of bring functionality. So, you won't always get out of the box every single feature, but I think there's already a really thriving plugin ecosystem around the block editor. There are so many plugins out there now that offer really high standard of blocks. There's some really good themes that support the editor. So yeah, I think the future in terms of that is looking bright. And currently, I think there are some, compared to other page builders, there's a lack of some specific tools, particularly responsive page design tools that allow you to build pages for not just desktop, but mobile content as well. And I think that's probably something that needs to be addressed in the future as well, to make it a really compelling site building option. And then, in some themes, I think there's an issue where maybe the content that you're developing doesn't always match what's in the editor. But I think that's something that is getting a lot better as well. That's pretty much everything I had. So is that okay?
Do you want to demonstrate anything? It's up to you.
Sure, yeah. Maybe I've got a chair. So yeah, this is the post editor at the moment. So this is kind of what has traditionally been available. And as I mentioned, everything just works as a block. So if you're not familiar with the block editor, it's the basic building block is the paragraph block, but you can insert images as blocks. You can reorder your content. It's very flexible. I don't have a great deal to add, but if you're using a theme that opts into full site editing, there are a few out there at the moment, then you will be able to edit your entire site using the block editor plugin. But just a warning, this is still kind of an experimental phase, so things might be liable to change. So I wouldn't recommend doing that on a production site. That's
awesome.
About it.
Round of applause for that. I'm not mic'd up, and these guys are, which is why I'm using the microphone so that the videos can actually hear it. So I'm going to let Joff introduce himself to you because he'll do a much better job of it than I can. And while he's doing that, I'm going to bring up the email he just sent me with his slides so that we don't have to switch laptops. So I'll let Joff take over and introduce you and tell him a little bit about the builder that he'll be representing today.
Just checking this thing's on. I feel like I have an unfair advantage, sorry Dan, of presenting Elementor, and you'll see why in a second. So is there anyone here who hasn't had a play, doesn't know about Elementor? Haven't touched it? What builder do you use?
I don't know, Gaye. What builder do I use?
Divi. Okay, Divi we'll see later. And look, Divi is great. I have to say that I've been a bit of an Elementor fan since it kind of came out. I build all my sites with Elementor, and it's one of those things where for me it's about being able to hand it to a client and have an easy learning curve. So I can design it all, I can lock it down so they can still use the Gutenberg editor and put in their content, their images, but you're not then leaving design decisions to your client who suddenly decides they want a bright pink header and a lime green body and a purple footer. There's some decision making that can go into it where you can decide how much access each of the people responsible for the website get. So these are our contenders today. And this was the first thing that popped up for me, was the only two that you can access for free and get started with are Elementor and Gutenberg. So the other two, there's a starting price of either $89 or $99. So you're kind of already committing to, I've put money into this builder. Elementor gives a fairly decent set of page builder tools for free. Gutenberg, well, sorry Dan, but this is my thoughts on Gutenberg. Does anyone know what that references? When U2 partnered with Apple to put their latest album on every iPhone that was sold, you didn't get an option. You got that album whether you like U2 or not. And I kind of feel the same way about Gutenberg to some extent. And don't get me wrong, I love WordPress, but the Gutenberg editor for me just seemed to be too early. And similar things on the WordPress repository. Again, sorry Dan and Automattic if you're watching. If you look at the popular plugins, there's this beautiful plugin here called Classic Editor, 5 million downloads. I'm not tearing it to shreds, honestly. It will be great. I have to say, I'm really excited actually about what Dan said about the future of Gutenberg. I'm talking about where we're at today. You want to build a site? So the only other one on that list of popular ones for a page builder, if we go back one, is Elementor. 5 million active installations. Whoop, hadn't updated that from Divi. So round two, Divi. Now Dan mentioned about clean code, and that's, look, Divi's amazing. Divi's got some great functionality, it's got great features, but if you build similar landing page and then you remove the plugin, that's what it's going to look like with Elementor, and that's what it's going to look like with Divi. So one, you actually still have your content there, it's kind of readable, doesn't look the best, but the other one is complete gibberish. So for me, that knocked Divi out of the equation. Oxygen, similar thing, disable it, it's all the content's in shortcodes, but Oxygen also disables the theme. It also disables your widgets. So it's just basically going, you're in our ecosystem now and we're going to take half of the core of WordPress away, which really can limit the functionality of other plugins you might use. So now to actually getting on to Elementor. I'll just do a bit of social proof first to say it's not just me ranting on about how great Elementor is. If you look at the Google search, you might say, well, that could be positive or negative. And then you look at the G2 Crowd's page builder ranking. None of the other plugins we're talking about tonight are on there. If we look at the top 1 million websites from Built With, Elementor is the only page builder on there. So there's around 4.5 million sites within those, total live sites. So estimated in the top million, 36,000 sites within that top million that are built by Elementor. And to actually some of the features that it has. So it's a visual design editor similar to the other page builders that we're talking about tonight. But as you can see, if we look at what was the Gutenberg editor to here, it's a lot more visual, a lot more rich with different features. There is a drag and drop editor, both dragging the widgets around the page, dragging sections of the page around, but also the navigator. So if you have a very complicated page with lots of widgets and bits and pieces going on, you've got this navigator which nests each of those elements in the page structure at the side. You can also undo or redo any of your features. So if you make a mistake or if you decide that something went a bit awry, you can roll back again. Quick feature I didn't know about and whether YouTube's going to load is there's a finder in there. So if you're in the page builder, you can just hit the finder and find any particular template that you might be in. Global style editor, so you can have global colors, fonts, typography, buttons, so you can have that consistent look and feel throughout your entire site. And you've got the Elementor theme builder here. So all of your 404 pages, search results, product pages, headers, footers, the lot. You've got a builder here which will put the scaffolding together for you. This is this is the site editor here, where you can switch between your header, the main content, and the footer without actually having to leave the editor, go and open up the next one, make the edit. So you can really see what the changes to your header, the content, and the footer look like in one space. Now, this is one of the best features that I use a lot, because I'll create something on a dev site and I go, cool, and I don't want to have to like push all the site to production. You can copy your content, copy a section, copy a whole page template if you want, between your tabs if you've got two different sites open to another website. So Elementor has some magic behind it that allows you to just copy any Elementor layout that you've created to any other Elementor page that you've created. Have a blank page on a website and you want to take that and put it on another website, copy and paste. For me, that was just the knockout blowout of all of these page builders, because I'm often working on one and I go, I like that, I can change I can use the same layout, just change the typography and the colours and some of the images, and I've got this great layout that I can then put on some of my other sites as well. Global widgets, so you can save a widget and you can style it and then you can put it anywhere on your site, and you just change it once to make any changes to that widget and it replicates across the entire site. So you're not having to go, where did I put that contact form, and having to roll out those changes in multiple places. The other page builders don't have a pop-up builder, so come on YouTube. It's done all right. Pop-up builder, it's very simple animation, but there's all sorts of sidebar pop-ups, full page, modals, hello bars. So you're not having to add another plugin to do pop-ups if that's something you want on your site. The form builder is also a mark above the rest as well. This layout here is quite easy. You choose your field and then you choose, okay, well that one's 50% wide. The other one's 50% wide, and you just drag and drop them into. So as many columns, whatever flexible layout you want. The other page builders we're talking about tonight, you do need to write CSS code to get that multi-column layout. There's form widgets that are fairly advanced, recaptures, calendars, multi-step forms. The amount of time I spent prior to Elementor with Contact Form 7 wrestling with CSS styles and trying to find the right IDs or classes to get that kind of thing happening. And now it's straight out of the box with Elementor. So that was a huge win for me. WooCommerce, if you're doing e-commerce sites, there's all sorts of WooCommerce widgets there. There's interaction design. So you can go over the top with this. If you have a look at Elementor's website and you go to their motion design page, you'll see what I mean by over the top. They've kind of put all the bells and whistles on there. It's kind of cool, but it's also quite heavy page load, but it's fun. And these are sort of the differences. So in Pro, you've got 24/7 support. You've got a whole bunch more templates, the theme builder, the form builder, the pop-up builder, a bunch more widgets, custom fields, so toolset, pods, ACF, all of your custom post type plugins for WordPress are integrated. You've got display conditions for where you want your widgets to display, so desktop, mobile, tablet. You can also customize all the design and styling for each of those breakpoints. One of the big things for me for forms was these request parameters. So if any of you in marketing know about URL parameters for your tracking code. So say, for example, for Google tracking your campaigns, you've got your source, your medium, your campaign and your keyword as parameters you might put on a URL. You can add those in the form. So if you've created a landing page for your campaign, you can send all of those parameters through with that form submission into Google Analytics and your other reporting tools. Integrates with a bunch of stuff, plus it has webhooks, so you can integrate with a bunch of others. Lots of resources for developers, so your hooks, your classes, functions, etc. And APIs. There's APIs for the theme, for forms, for queries. And this was a great resource as well. Envato Elements, the subscription's not that much, And the fabulous library they have has 767 template kits designed for Elementor and Elementor Pro. So if you want a starting point, you go, I don't even know where to start, you can find one of these that's the closest to what you need, and then you can just swap out colours, images, and you've got a beautifully built website in no time.
So next up we have Gaye Nilson, who is, as I mentioned, also an advisor with the Australian Small Business Advisory Service. You can find out more about the service through Business Station. And if you have an ABN and less than 20 staff members, it's actually free for your first session. So you can book a one-to-one with myself or Gaye or any of our advisors at no cost to yourself, which is pretty much a no-brainer. And Gaye actually is going to be presenting about Divi today. Now, I know for a fact, because we have talked about this before, that Divi is not the only page builder that Gaye has used in the past. But I know that she has also done a lot of work with people who are building their own websites, and I think she's got some really strong arguments about it, so I'm really interested to hear what she says, because I personally can't stand Divi. So this is going to be really interesting. So we've got Gaye presenting on Divi, and then our last speaker is going to be Marcus, who's going to be talking about Oxygen, which is kind of the new kid in the room. And then once we're done with that, we will bring everyone up to the front and have a chat about how they all compare to each other.
All right, okay, so I'll just run through these slides quickly. So one of the first things I would say about Divi is that it's a theme and page builder in one. So you don't have to go and find a theme and then choose a page builder. It's all together. It does include the theme builder, so you can build the whole site with the Divi builder. And it has global presets, which makes it really easy to have your set your consistency of your styling throughout the site, and also quick and easy bulk editing. So, as I said, being that it's all in one, it's seamless, it's all integrated. It has heaps of modules and layout packs that you can choose from, or you can just start from a blank page. Okay, you don't have to have a layout to start with. You just start from a blank page if you choose. So it's very easy to apply lots of different styling and effects. There's heaps of stuff built in. And I think it's great for DIYers. It's very easy to use with the visual builder. You can drag and drop your modules. Very, very simple to use. And I think it's also great for designers and devs because it does have a lot of, you can basically do anything you want with it. Easily add code and add CSS and everything, do whatever you want. So the theme builder allows you to create your header, footer and body templates for anywhere across the website. So your pages, posts, custom post types, all your category and archive pages, all of that. Global presets. So what this allows you to do, and what I've started doing, is because it's a fairly recent sort of feature that they've brought out. So you can create a style guide on the website and add all your preset styles and variations of those styles. And then when you're building your page, you just choose from those presets. And then when you update a preset anywhere, it'll apply across the whole site, the changes. And they've also just very recently added global colours. So the same thing you can set, if you set a colour as global, it'll update across the whole site. I haven't really played with that much because that's only come out very recently. With the bulk editing, you can select multiple modules and make a change to all of them all at once. You can make it, if you're in a module and make a change, you can apply to all throughout the whole page or the row or the section. And you can also right-click and copy and paste your styles as well. So it makes it really easy when you're editing. And just a couple of final things. The responsive design, there's multiple screen sizes. So when you're in the visual builder, you can select. Of course, there's desktop, tablet, and mobile. But when you do select tablet and mobile, you can actually change the size down to very specific devices. So Samsung, iPad, all of those things. So it's quite. You can get right down. You can save and reuse your page layouts or sections or modules into a library and then reuse them. As I said, when you're creating a new page, you can either start from blank or select from a library, whether that's the layout library that comes with Divi or your own library that you create, or you can clone an existing page. There is a massive community around Divi. People either love it or hate it, but there are a lot of people that love it. And it's a simple one flat price. It's either $89 a year or $249 for a lifetime license. So there's no, that's what it is. And that's what you get everything for that. There's no levels or anything. That's US dollars. Okay, so let's go over to here now. Okay, so there's the Divi theme builder. So it allows you to add a global header, body and footer, or you can also add for and select where you want to add it to, whether you want it to all posts or specific categories, archive pages, all sorts of things. Any custom post types that you create or add will be in the template settings there, your search results and 404 pages. And you can also do things like, okay, if I want all posts in all categories except, so you can exclude categories. So it's quite sort of granular. You can get down right into what you need. Adding a footer is easy. I'll show you one from the library. So they're my saved layouts. This is just a Divi one that I've saved. And then if I save that, refresh the page. This is just a development site that I've been putting together. And there's the footer that I've just added. So you can't edit it within the page. You can't edit the page and the header and the footer within the one screen like you can with Elementor. But you go back to the theme builder to edit there. Now this is a style guide page. So in here, and this is the global presets. So this is something that I would set up for a client, for a website I'm building. This is all the colours and everything. And then you can add all your different modules and add your styling. So for instance, with these buttons, I've got 3 different left aligned buttons and 3 centred buttons. So now if I edit this page, I've got the buttons added, okay, from before. They're just the standard. So if I go into the settings of that, so that's the preset, that's a default preset. This one has a preset of button red centered, and this one is just a yellow, button yellow. So if I go into here, and I'll just actually close that one. Okay, so yeah. So if I want to edit, let's say, this centered red button and perhaps just realign it. I want to make it right aligned. And maybe I want to just change the design a little bit. Let's add a shadow to it. And then what I do is go into the preset and update the preset. Yes, save, and then refresh. And there, so any buttons that I've added with that preset style will be updated throughout the whole site. So yeah. So adding new content. So you can see here, this is a section and this is a row. And then these are modules, so I can add a new row just by clicking the plus, and if I want to add one with, say, 4 columns. And then these are all the different modules that you can add. So if I wanted to add, let's say, a call to action, and then another one. Okay, so if I go into this one and want to make some changes, I'll go into the design, just change the font, and so any changes. I can then extend call to action styles throughout this page, or just this section, just this row, just this column. And you can see it's just automatically updated the rest of them. So those are just, makes it really easy, quick and easy when you're wanting to make changes to your designs. That was about, I think I've probably run out of time, so that's about all I wanted to cover, really.
All right, thanks very much, Gaye. And that was pretty neat, actually. I had not seen the extend to all on the page before in Divi, so that was very cool. I'm definitely going to use that next time I can't palm off a Divi client onto you. So our last speaker tonight is Marcus, and a big round of applause, because not only is this Marcus's first time presenting at a WordPress meetup, it's his first time attending a WordPress meetup, so we really properly threw him under the bus. So we're really grateful that he can join us today. Let's give him a clap first so that he doesn't have too much pressure, all right? So Marcus is one of the requests that we had when we sort of mentioned that we wanted to do this topic was a lot of people asking about oxygen, because it's kind of one of those ones that everyone hears things about, but there's a lot less information about it compared to some of the more popular builders like Elementor and Divi and Beaver Builder and ones like that. And we'll get into why we chose this for at the end when we do the panel. But luckily, I was fortunate enough to come across Marcus and meet him at just the right time. And as a result, he's here to tell us a little bit about oxygen today. So I look forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
Cool, thanks, Jo. I guess I'll just start off by saying that I have actually, I guess I'm coming at it from a bit of more of an agency perspective, and I've probably used 15 odd different types of builders, and yes, probably built more websites with Elementor than anything else. So put that out there to start with. But yeah, looking at oxygen today, and I originally came across it a few years ago, and it seemed pretty cool, but there was a few kind of checks in there that when I was going through kind of my checklist of would it actually work, there was a few red flags, such as not being able to hand it over to a client at the end of the day because it was a bit complicated. But it's had some updates since then, and I came back to it end of last year and ended up purchasing it, and I've been using it the last few months a little bit, but still approach websites using a mix of different builders. So hopefully this is a nice look at it from a kind of a broader and different perspective. My screens are not duplicated. Cool. So first of all, what is Oxygen? I mean, yep, it's a page builder. I would probably look at it as kind of like a Canva versus Photoshop comparison, where Canva would almost be like your Elementor, where it's a lot easier, drag and drop focus that kind of, I mean, I've trained lots of clients on Elementor, and it's pretty easy. They get it pretty quick. I think I'm a pretty smart person that picks up technology quickly, and I struggled a lot using this the first time. And I guess also because I'm the type that likes to do it rather than reading the documentation, I probably started about 5 times over on my first one before getting too far into it. So buyers beware. But once you get into it, it's got some pretty special stuff. Will that work? Sorry. So just a quick one in terms of competition. It was actually built based off of Workflow, which can I just have a quick show of hands who has heard of Workflow? Oh, I might have got that wrong. It's a Webflow. Sorry. Yep. Probably just mistyped that last night. When you kind of compare the two, they're kind of similar in that regard. And from something Joff said earlier, because they kind of strip out the theme and everything, you almost could have this as an entirely different system, not even using WordPress, but obviously there's that whole ecosystem aspect there, which makes it beneficial. But it was based off a standalone CMS originally. Its main competition, I would say, is actually just custom websites, because it does have a much more of a developer focus rather than an individual coming into it. So it's definitely more for power users or agencies that are trying to do some more complicated things. But yep, still has the competition of the block builders and standard page builders. In terms of key features, If you're like a proper developer going into it, but you don't want to have to custom code everything, this does let you do lots more than a standard page builder does. Allows you to extend it nicely and add in your own bits of custom code, but also takes care of a lot of stuff for you that you would have had to spend time on before. In terms of Joff's price comparison, if you do go pro, which let's face it, everyone has to go pro if they're doing it from a business perspective at a bit higher level, or you're an agency, which is where I'm looking at it from. This, aside from Gutenberg, even with Gutenberg, this is the cheapest option because it is a one-off purchase. It's not a monthly fee like all of the others. Gutenberg's free. I love it. Build it. Well, sorry, don't love Gutenberg. Love the blocks on top of Gutenberg that work with it that make it amazing. But some of those are paid, so that can add up more. In terms of performance, I haven't actually used Elementor 3, so can't speak to that too much. I've heard it's pretty fantastic. Elementor is also, Oxygen is also fantastic, fast, clean HTML, all of that good stuff. I'll show you a demo site soon, which I just put some stuff together from some preset templates, and I think without any optimizations, just on a dev link, it gets 95 and 95 out of 100. So that's before kind of doing any work for it after 10 minutes of throwing things together. So it's a nice starting point for people. In terms of flexibility, it's the premise of Oxygen is if the data exists in the site somewhere, you can put it wherever you want, which will make probably a bit more sense when I can show you in person. But basically, if you have your toolset, your ACF in there, or even just any customer data, you can put in an element, whether that's a paragraph or an image or whatnot, in any location on the site, and it'll extract from that, pull from that with whatever conditions you choose from. So you can do some pretty cool things there. In terms of community, I just wanted to put that there because I've been part of a lot of website groups, WordPress groups, all of that, page builder groups, and ended up leaving a lot of them because you just get such inane, stupid questions again and again and again that you sometimes just get very frustrated and leave it. But at least what I've seen so far from the Oxygen side, you get some very smart people because a lot of them are developers doing some very cool projects, and it's just really nice to see that kind of, I guess, innovation and nice things rather than basic Google problem solving that anyone could do. Dynamic data already did. And reusability. So similar to what Joff was saying in terms of copy and paste, you can do that here as well, but I guess potentially to a higher level as well, with you can copy an entire site with more ease as well as individual elements. And there's also a really nice system in there where you can tie styling from an individual element to a class and apply that class to any element to have that same style applied to it really easily and nicely. In terms of disadvantages, so I mean, one thing with it, it replaces the theme of the site, which I don't think many people are using Oxygen and doing that on a live site that already had stuff there. It's usually done from scratch. And what it does mean is some plugins will have incompatibilities with it because they're built to work on how WordPress uses themes and how that goes into the system. So this does break some things, but again, it's been around for a few years. It's gotten better in terms of connecting with things, and other things have also, theme developers, plugin developers have also started adding support for it to work both ways. So for example, there used to be an issue with SEO plugins not being able to pull the data out, and now several of the major ones work well with it. And mentioned the learning curve. It's not for the faint of heart on the first one. And the UI of it is does look a little bit dated, even though it's a pretty new one. Behind the scenes, I'm just going to jump over to just a demo site of it. But the three kind of core things that really, I guess, stood out to me and why I wanted to buy it and start using it was these three things. So states is basically when we go on to an element, you can style it, but you can also click on states and go, okay, let's style it now on a hover state or on an active state, so that when you have you're hovering over it or you're interacting on the page, you can make it do whatever you want, essentially. Tying in with that is transitions, so you can make it, fade out or add a box shadow, anything really. And templates is basically that theme builder where you can build your header and footer or anything else and make those stack on top of each other so that you have different templates for different pages depending on what you're trying to show when and where. So I'll just figure out how to pull this across. Sorry, this is a little bit difficult to see. Okay, so let me just jump to front end for a second. Apologies, it's not showing up on my laptop screen. So, so this is just a kind of a pre-built site I just threw together, and here is the kind of interface. What I wanted to show first of all, oh, my scroll has reversed. So states. If I, for example, if I view this here, go over it. Okay, you know it's apparently clickable, but nothing happens. If we go into here, open the element, and look up here at states, this is just an ID that's been given to it, but we can view it on a hover state and style it differently. Or you could do whatever here really, but let's just change the color. If I save that now, it'll be pretty terrible, but just to give you an example. So now it automatically changes. But you can make that a lot nicer by looking at the effects in here. So let's make that take half a second. And let's just do that on both sides. Sorry, just refreshing. So I mean, you can obviously play with this, but that just gives it's very easy to make effects like that happen on there. And it's not just limited to that kind of simple stuff, I guess. There are, where am I? There are transformations that you can do as well, I mean, among other things, but any of these sort of aspects you could, oh, sorry, probably want to do that on hover. Again, this is going to look terrible because I don't know what I'm typing, but hopefully you get the point. That it'll, yeah, easy to change without any kind of, I guess, coding, if you will. So basically with this, you can build around your, I guess they call it inner content, which is the page content that's on a page, which can also be a post or anything else. But what this shows is that you've got, okay, I've put a header in here, then we've got the body content, which is everything on the page, and then the footer. You can also see how this looks on different pages, so I don't think anything else actually exists here, but okay, just some random content. But you can see how it would look in different areas, which is more important when you get into doing different templates, applying for different pages and areas, because you can have inheriting templates. So basically, let's always keep a header and a footer, but on certain pages, let's add this extra element, which could be anything really. It could be something that's a global element, so you just need to update it in one spot and just have it appear in certain places. But similar to, I guess, how Elementor does it as well, you can just make your changes here. It'll save everywhere. And, sorry. In here, you can choose where it actually applies. So this one is just applying to all of the pages on the site. But you can also, I don't have multiple here at the moment, but you can also set, say, a secondary template which will apply this one and then have its own pieces that add on to there as well. Cool. So in terms of how they've, I guess, updated that to work for client handovers now, there's kind of two methods. One is using a Gutenberg integration, and one is just with permissions, but still using Oxygen itself. So using Gutenberg, basically you can make Gutenberg blocks in here, which let you add all of the, I guess, styling, colors, how it all actually looks. But then the client, when they add it or they edit it as a Gutenberg block just with that editor, they can change the text, the images, the links, that kind of stuff. So again, similar to what Joff was saying, they can't make it hot pink, but they can change the actual content of it, which that will work for a lot of people. But if not, if they need more control, this is kind of what you're looking at for if you're letting them use Oxygen itself, but giving them more permission. So for example, you might not want them to actually be able to add and edit classes if you actually have built your site out having a kind of a holistic design style, but you can give them bits and pieces in here. So in terms of being a theme or a page builder, it definitely does both. You do have that full header and footer control. You can have the inheriting templates, and you can choose where they display and when, depending on what you are showing. And I encourage people to try it. It is, there's basically a sandbox that opens up here, which is active for a week for free. You can install their pre-built templates or just have a blank install and have a play around. Probably recommend use a pre-built so you can see how they've kind of structured it. It's certainly, if you're going in for the very first time, a bit hard to do it from blank, but if you have a pre-built anything, really, it's kind of, you can see how it's done and go off of that. So that was all. Thank you.
So what I might do is I'll just invite our speakers up to the front and grab a seat on our lovely panel chairs that I placed here earlier. Just a quick recap of our speakers. So we have Daniel, who is from Automattic, and he has done a whole bunch of work on the open source project for Gutenberg. So he is going to be answering questions and talking, focusing primarily on the block editor. We have Marcus, who we just heard from, talking about Oxygen, which is kind of the unfamiliar one to a lot of people, I guess. Joff, who is talking about Elementor, and Gaye, who is talking about Divi. So thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to start off actually with a question just to get everyone started. And then what we'll do is we'll sort of open it up so that you can ask all of your burning questions of our panel today. And feel free to direct them at a single person, or we can get everybody to answer. It's totally up to you. So the question that I have for you to start with is, what is the speed of the editing experience in the backend like? So I come at this from someone who's used quite a few different builders. So Divi, Beaver Builder, Elementor, WP Bakery. I've sort of come across all of these as an advisor, and I've noticed that there is quite a difference in the speed of actually making changes. So not necessarily while you're viewing the website, but while you're actually doing the editing. So I'm curious to know what your feedback is on the different builders there. So we'll start with Joff because he has the microphone.
Great. Well, I guess for Elementor, it's an interesting one. It really depends on the number of other plugins that add widgets into the tool. Out of the box, it's pretty fast. It also depends on how many widgets or components you put on a page. So really, it is definitely something that can affect the back end when you're editing, but then obviously caching the content. And I think that's where the template library comes in. If you are planning a website, you're going through a UX design process and you know the sections, you know the flow of your pages, you can actually design each of those sections as a pre-built template and then drop them in rather than having to tweak around with smaller settings within that page builder.
Awesome. We might jump to the other end and we'll get Dan to answer next.
Yeah, sure. So I think pretty quick in terms of your basic kind of editing operations, because with Gutenberg, you're literally editing what's in the page directly. So, I mean, whereas compared to maybe some other page builders, you have to pop open another, like pop over, which shows a text field, and then you have to edit there, which is a bit inconvenient. There are some quality of life features that we have in Gutenberg, like reusable blocks. So you can select any set of blocks, make them reusable, insert them in other places on your site, and then when you edit those reusable blocks, every part of your site updates. But I think the thing that's probably lacking is stuff like the global styles that the other editors offer. That is coming in the future, though. That's something that's being worked on.
We'll go Marcus next, because he's closest to the microphone.
Yeah, look, I find it pretty fast. It's definitely helpful that it all the editing that you do is either on the elements in the page itself or in that left-hand side column of settings that come up, so you don't have the extra pop-ups and everything opening to edit content. The issue it does have is when you go to go between many different pages. By default, just due to the way that it's been kind of constructed, it does sometimes spit out some warnings when you're trying to open many edited pages at once. There are plugins and extensions to it out there which kind of override that at your own risk, but I've not had any issues with that so far. So yeah, pretty fast.
Awesome. And Gaye, what can you tell us about Divi?
Okay, well, there have been a lot of improvements more recently in Divi. I know there have been some issues in the past, but as Joff said, it's the same thing. If there's a lot of plugins, it can weigh it down. So it depends how it's been set up. But generally, it's pretty good.
Awesome. And just a quick question, is there any other page builders that you have used, any of the four of you that you think are noticeably better or worse in terms of the editing speed on the back end?
Well, my pet hate is WP Bakery.
Sorry, WP Bakery. I think
Right.
Yeah. Is there any WP Bakery fans here? No? Yeah? User or fan? User, yeah. They're different. So hopefully you've seen some other options today. No, I shouldn't say that. Definitely don't have a preference, except for that my preference is not to use WP Bakery. But look, I've definitely noticed that in the back end, the editing experience is quite slow. We actually used to use Beaver Builder a lot, and we moved to Elementor because the back end editing speed was a lot faster. But as Joff mentioned, definitely having more blocks installed makes that a little bit slower. So, and I think that will go for pretty much all of them. So if you're experiencing really slow editing, maybe have a look at whether you unnecessarily have a lot of elements or blocks or whatever they call them in your specific page builder installed.
And your host plays a big part too.
That's right, yeah, your host definitely plays a big part in terms of the speed.
Prompt for a WP engine. I just wanted to add that a lot of the plugins, you can actually choose which of the widgets to load. So if you are having other plugins that extend Elementor and adding widgets, you can choose to only load in one or a few of those widgets. So you're not having to get the whole kit and caboodle loading every time you go into the editor. And it might be for those one or two features that you want to add it into a site.
Yeah, and I think most of them are like that. I think Beaver Builder, a lot of the extensions for that, you can choose what to activate or not activate. The same with Divi, the same with Elementor. I haven't used Oxygen, but I assume that's similar there.
Yeah, same for front end, back end.
Yeah, so does anyone have any burning questions to start us off? Or otherwise I've got some more prepared just in case everyone's feeling very shy today. Pat, I will come and bring you the microphone in a second.
I've been playing around with a new Elementor plugin called Designer Power-Ups, which is inspired by Webflow. It's very grid orientated, using new CSS grid tools to be able to really play around with grid design rather than most page builders are centered around columns. And the grid, it makes a very interesting, I haven't mastered it yet, I have to say, but it's a very interesting approach. Is Oxygen similar? Has it taken on that capability with grids?
Yeah, so Oxygen uses Flexbox by default, so the design set that I showed you on the screen, that was by a kind of a third-party plugin which does use CSS Grid as its default way of styling it. So both, yes, it doesn't use columns at all in that regard.
Yep, so I think Flexbox is what most of them are based on. So Oxygen is also based on Flexbox, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep. And anything to add to that, Joff, about Elementor?
No.
No? Yeah, so I think most stuff out of the box is based on Flexbox, which is the columns that you mentioned. So for those of you who aren't overly familiar with any of these solutions, most of them work on a similar kind of concept. So Hands up if there's anything different in your particular builder. So I think it's pretty much even the same in the blocks. We've got sections or rows, sections.
I think in Gutenberg it really depends on the block. So there are grid blocks as well, but there are column blocks as well.
Yeah, so I think what you call a block is essentially what's a section on most other, or you have like a default block takes up a whole section or a whole row. Yeah, and Oxygen also works on a section, column.
Yeah, section, row, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
So sections and then columns is going down vertically, so you might have 5 columns on a page or 2 columns or whatever.
Divi is sections, rows, and columns.
Right, so Divi separates it even more into, so you have multiple rows inside a section, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool, and sections, columns, elements for Elementor, or blocks or whatever you want to call them. Oxygen the same? Yep. And then with the block editor, it's obviously a little bit different. So you have blocks, but within those blocks, you can have a column block or a grid block or something like that. So cool. Has anyone else run into anything in terms of using the grid layout, CSS grid versus Flexbox?
Probably like browser support is one thing. So if you really need to support AE, grid probably works.
Is that still considered a browser?
Well, it's now just dropped below 1% apparently, so looking forward to the day when we can drop it.
Someone from Microsoft officially announced that it was no longer considered a browser, and that was good enough for me to take it out of what we support. So, if you still support Internet Explorer, let me know so I can refer people to you. Yes. Cool. All right. Do we have any more questions? Yes. Let me bring in the microphone.
Honestly, how long does it take to search for an answer to a roadblock that you might have come across YouTube or community forums?
Great question.
So we have the WordPress.org forums where there's a lot of support for the block editor. There are Slack channels as well where you can ask questions if you're more developer oriented. I think there are a lot of answers out there on like Stack Exchange and places like that as well. So there's a good availability of answers out there.
Yeah, I guess I haven't had to go out there looking for answers yet. I have watched a bunch of tutorials and that sort of stuff on it just to kind of see what was possible with it. And there is plenty of that sort of content out there with a kind of yes, it's low market share, but there's a very vocal minority that use it. So there is quite a bit of content, and that can, I guess, range in skill level as to what they're trying to do. So some cool stuff out there, but haven't had to go digging too hard yet.
Something obnoxious like Elementor doesn't have problems, so you don't need to bother. For me, when it has been something that I've had a roadblock against, it's been more in the technical integration side, and the developer resources on the Elementor website have a fairly detailed API, and they also break down how all of the widget structure works. So that's kind of my go-to point. But then also using search parameters in Google to really refine it down to exactly the specific issue that I'm having will really pull those queries in. But as Dan said, Stack Exchange and sometimes JS Fiddle to see that someone's tried implementing it and has a real world example.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources and groups for Divi users. So we'll quite often turn to those. There's a Slack group. There's quite a few Facebook groups, and you can usually find answers fairly quickly. And if you ask the question, you get replies fairly quickly usually. Yep. And Elegant Themes themselves, which is the developer of Divi, they bring out regular blogs that are very helpful on how to do certain things, and as well. So
I also add that Elementor has 24/7 support. So if you're a pro customer, you can call anytime. So they support all time zones in that you can actually have a live support service.
Cool. Anything else to add from any of our speakers? I will add that as an Elementor Pro user, I wish that their support was better, because I often they often if you come to them, usually when we go to the support with a really technical question. So this is my question to you. Have you had to use their support for something that's a little bit hinky? that maybe isn't covered by their standard documentation. Obviously going to them as someone who's an agency or a developer rather than going to them as sort of a general user. I've already exhausted all of the documentation, and I know that it's not that I haven't followed the instruction and pressed the button the right way, it's that there's fundamentally a problem. So I haven't had the greatest experience with Elementor in that respect, but I'm curious to know what your experience has been with the developer themselves.
Yeah, I've only had to contact them a couple of times, but they do have in the Divi area in the website in the back end, there is a support page, and you can actually give them access to log in and have a look at the site to troubleshoot it, and you just log a ticket with them, and you get a code to plug into the ticket, and they'll look at it for you. And there's also safe mode, so there's just a button, you click safe mode, and it'll and then you can, and that only just turns it off for the person logged in, doesn't affect the front end of the site, so you can troubleshoot as well. So there's a couple of good features there.
I would agree with you, Jo. Elementor support is great for general usage, but if you're down the rabbit hole, like I tend to be on a lot of projects, the issues I was experiencing was fairly early, and they've addressed that now, is around automation and some of the API stuff for their forms engine. So that was a little bit for their support team at that time anyway.
Yeah, haven't talked to them.
So it's a bit different for Gutenberg because as a free open source software, there's not really dedicated support. But I mean, yeah, there are, you can just go onto the project on GitHub and create a bug report if you find a bug, or if anything that's like you find difficult. You can create an enhancement request as well. And yeah, I'm generally answering those on a daily basis. So
Anything to add on that one? No. My experience with Beaver Builder, just throwing that one out there because I know that there was a question. I don't know if that person is here today or if they're watching, but there was someone that asked about Beaver Builder. The technical support was pretty good, but I didn't like the documentation as much. So I think Elementor has better documentation. Beaver Builder had better support, and WP Bakery is just all round terrible in terms of support. Sorry if they're watching. Do we have any more questions from the audience? No. Otherwise, I have I have a whole bunch of them prepared just in case this happened, right? So we have one over here. Brilliant. Whew, you just don't want to hear me talk anymore. I get it.
So my biggest criticism usually of Divi is that when I go online, I can go, oh, that site was made with Divi. Usually it's the navigation bars and the buttons I find. They're very similar on a lot of decent, just basic sites. So I guess my question is, how easy is it to make your own site, sort of have your own appeal with each of the site builders rather than just being the standard default?
Well, yeah, I find it quite easy, really, to style you really can tell a default Divi styled site, definitely. But it's very easy to change the styling on all the different modules and really make it customize it to how you want. Yeah.
I guess it comes down to workflow and how comfortable you feel with design. And it's probably the same for a lot of the editors. Are you going straight to the builder and grabbing a template that you're trying to customize, or are you actually starting with a process where you're going through, say, the user experience and then wireframing and designing on top of that? Because then you will have that unique or the distinct style that ties into the brand. But a lot of the builders, the generic templates all do look the same, and it frustrates the bejesus out of me. You see in one of the end slides I had Envato elements, there's 767 different template kits that all have different styles on there. So you can definitely find one of those that doesn't look like the rest. Some of them go a little bit left of center. That can be great for the right purpose, but it's really up to how much of a design eye you and skills in applying those styles that you have.
I think I'm just going to add on that. I don't know if this microphone's working or not, so apologies if those people can't hear me, but I would also add on that I look at most websites, if I see a blob on there, I instantly know that it's been built with Elementor, because that's like their thing, right? They have the blobs. So I think I know what you're referring to with the buttons, though, with like the expanding on hover. That's a very Divi thing, isn't it, right? You instantly know that's a Divi thing.
I'd say with Oxygen, it's probably the most likely out of all of them that it's someone coming in and building something completely from scratch. But when it comes to using it, like if it's not from I guess an agency perspective, going through that whole workflow process, and it is just an individual, yes, you can, grab templates and all of that. So I guess it's got an equal chance of that happening. With that said, the templates that they themselves have are very different. I was quite surprised that they're all kind of a bit weird and odd. And then, there's other kind of extensions which have their own design sets, and usually that would have, 5 designs of each kind of section or element so that you can mix and match and create something a bit more unique before you go edit it yourself. But yeah, I do think most people are kind of taking it from scratch or building out from something that has been put together by a designer first.
Yeah, I'd say it's a bit different again for the block editor, because blocks just generally assume the style that your theme defines. And then on top of that, you kind of have some customization options. Those customization options, as I mentioned, they're not going to be as in-depth as generally the other builders offer at the moment. There are more things being added every day, like being able to add spacing and padding and margin. So I think there'll be more offered out of the box in the future, but right now there are some great plugins that offer those kind of features as well.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what theme you choose, right, with the block editor.
Exactly, yeah.
It's so much dependent on what theme you use. So I think, and that's something that really is obviously one of the limitations of the block editor, is that it's very easy. You don't have to install anything new. But at the same time, if you want to really customize it, you either need to have an extra plugin to do that, or you need to understand a little bit of code and how you can sort of use CSS and that sort of thing to make changes to it yourself. So
yeah. So you can add a class name to any block and then just write some CSS in the customizer, which works pretty well if you're comfortable with CSS. And then there are some pretty cool options as well, like themes can define like style variations for blocks as well. So like if you've got, you might have like a light or a dark option for like your navigation or something like that, which you can choose between.
Cool. Do we have any more questions for our panelists? No? So in terms of integrations, do you have a number one sort of, set of blocks or elements or something like that, sort of extensions that you really like for the builder of choice that you're representing today? So do you have we'll start off with Daniel because he's got the microphone. Do you have a favorite set of blocks out other than obviously the ones built into Gutenberg, which are fantastic? I hear the developers are great people. So do you have any other sort of favorite blocks that you really like?
That's a good question. I haven't really checked recently, but there's always new kind of block bundles popping up on the plugin store. One that I saw recently in a video was generate blocks, and I think I've seen people using those to build entire sites. Which looks really impressive, but I haven't actually used it personally. There's another kind of slightly different thing which I'd shout out to as well, as somebody kind of made an entirely different version of Gutenberg where it's called Iceberg, the Iceberg editor. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's really cool for writing posts. It just removes any of the complexity in the interface, really. It's just for pure kind of writing, if that's what you're into as well.
Yeah, quick shout out on the Gutenberg side to Cubely, Stackable, and then Generate Blocks, which goes with its theme, Generate Press. Very, very good all around for all of those. For Oxygen, in terms of just extending the kind of the experience editing and using the system itself, there's a extension, a plugin called Hydrogen Pack. It's, I think, $30 and you want it. There is also, so what I put together that little demo site with was called Oxy Ninja, which is basically just it's a combination of a whole set of designs, different sections all together rather than whole pages, but it's also built in the kind of the whole CSS grid framework into it. So every kind of element that was on that page had, 2 or 3 different classes applied to it already, which basically just means if you are adding anything new, you can just add a predefined class and all your styling will be consistent if you change that anywhere else on the site, or you can customize it, of course, as well, but it just helps if you kind of base everything off of that. It doesn't mean all your sites look the same, but you have a basis to work from that once you actually learn it and get into it, your time to develop things is incredibly quick.
For me, I guess my go-to, I have 2 tools. So obviously Elementor has some great APIs and they connect to the WordPress API. I use Toolset, which is a custom post type custom field builder. So you can pretty much create anything with that. And then Pabbly Connect. So it's similar to Zapier, has a massive library of integrations. And so basically my process would be to use the Elementor forms, the API through there, and send that through Pabbly, and it can pretty much go to any marketing system or CRM or database or whatever I need it to, and heaps of transforms and different systems in there.
Okay, so yeah, Divi, there's heaps and heaps of plugins for Divi for specific little things. I recently bought one called Divi Plus, which has, I don't know how many, adds quite a few modules, about I don't know if it's 30 or 40 or 50 modules, which you can select. You can go through and select the ones you want to enable. They don't have to all be enabled. And just add some cool features, cool modules to in the builder. Other than that, there's not really anything I specifically use all the time. Just if I need something for something in particular, there's a lot out there. So yeah.
Awesome. I also have used Elementor quite a lot, and my favorite extension for Elementor is actually one called Dynamico, or it's dynamic.oo. And I really love how that really extends the ability for you to integrate with pretty much anything using Elementor. So it opens up, rather than just connecting to sort of the default fields, you can write your own little like PHP code and stuff and connect it. So for us, we do a lot of like really deep integration work. And I find that really useful. And my favorite block package is the GetWid group of blocks. They're pretty great. So I particularly like that they have, I think, like a custom post block, I think is one of the ones that they have. And I'd love to see that integrated into Gutenberg. So that brings me to my last question. So does anyone else, before I ask my last question, does anyone else have anything they would like to hear from our panel? No? So my last question is, what would you like to see your builder or any of the other builders introduce in or build in and include and get better at? So we'll start with Gaye. What would you like to see Divi do better, or any of the other builders if you like?
I can probably think of something when I sit down tomorrow and start working on it, but I just can't really think of anything at the moment.
There's 2 things for me. One is accessibility, and I've noticed that the new Elementor 3 is looking at a bunch of improvements in their accessibility. But also I think, Jo, you got me onto a concept of headless CMS. So working with Gatsby and Netlify to basically deploy a static site, and then the CMS just becomes basically the back end for you to create your site, and it gets generated as static output. So I'd love to see more of that being a more integrated workflow within the WordPress platform.
I think that's slightly easier now with 3.5 from Gatsby coming out, I think this week or last week.
Good to know.
I think for Oxygen, it would just be that whole kind of user experience and onboarding for people. I mean, I think it's probably the most powerful builder out there, but it's just not that easy to use for some people. So I think if they get over that and the kind of the UI of it, it would, improve a lot for lots of people.
Yeah, probably the upcoming global styles feature, I think, will be really powerful for people who just want to be able to define a single style for their sites and then have that carry across all their content. Other than that, the thing I mentioned, responsive like design tools, I think would be really useful.
I have a wish list for Gutenberg if you ever want to hear it. just let me know. I was interviewed by SKT Themes recently, and they asked me what I would like to see introduced into WordPress. And this is a personal request I've given to you multiple times. Please stop my clients from being able to change the button styles in the block editor, because they are not graphics designers and they should not be able to change their button styles. But I do like being able to give them access to the block editor. So if you could just have a word with your people and just make that happen for me, that would be great. But I agree, responsiveness would definitely be great. I found it really interesting. I think Gaye was a Divi that allows you to check like specific devices. That's really cool. Something that's always been something that I've struggled with is the Elementor responsive tools. There's no equivalent to just checking it on your phone. Like you've got to actually open it on the device to get a real look at what it is going to look like. And you're always going to be limited to those sort of 2 cut points. So you've got mobile, tablet, and desktop. And if you want anything other than that, you need to know how to do a media query, and you need to know how to do a media query well. So.
Sorry, just on that, Oxygen obviously does have the presets, but you can also just define as many additional ones as you want. So you can swap between, if you wanted 30 different mobile device sizes or whatever, and customize for that as well.
Cool. Well, if no one else has any other questions for tonight, a big round of applause for our panel. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks, everyone, and drive home safely.